Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, I urge you to share the show. Spread the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast with a coffee lover, with a health fanatic. Share the show, people. Make sure you're subscribed so you get every episode, and give us a good rating and review if you have a minute. It really helps us climb the charts. Today, I am so excited to speak to a brand new guest on the show. He is a board-certified nutritionist. He's an author, and so much more. Author of Cracking the Metabolic Code, 9 Keys to Optimal Health. We have Jim Lavalle on the line. What's up, Jim?
How you doing?
Doing excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, my friend.
Sure.
So, Cracking the Metabolic Code, 9 Keys to Optimal Health. Before we jump into all of the subjects that I want to dig into deeply here, what can you tell us about the book from a 30,000-foot view? What were you trying to accomplish, and did you accomplish with this book?
Well, the purpose of the Metabolic Code book was, seeing some 80,000 patients doing precision health for almost 40 years. The whole genesis of the Metabolic Code book was to say, you know what, your health is more than your genes. Your health is more than just eating right and exercising. There's really a lot more to promoting your ultimate vitality than just that. So it's understanding the impact of stress and sleep and how these relationships between hormones like cortisol, glucose and insulin, and thyroid hormones interplay with each other. So it really was meant to be a workbook and a way to introduce. I really wrote it for consumers. Ended up that a lot of healthcare professionals are reading it. And we actually have a whole cloud-based data structure for it where you can put in your labs, put in a questionnaire, and it points where your metabolic roadblocks are at. And we're deploying that into doctors' offices as well. So wow. The book is really was the jumping point for understanding systems biology, like, how are things connected in your body? Things don't happen isolated most of the time, unless you get stabbed or shot, right? And even then your whole body responds to it. It's just an organ may have gotten more damage, right? Like in an accident. True. But in general, we're one whole body, and we have all these systems that are interconnected. And what I try to get across is that your health today is the sum total of all the metabolic reactions that have went on from the time you're in your mother's womb to today. And that means what you're exposed to, the diet you had, what drugs you had, what your exercise habits were, sleep habits were, food choices. All these things create your epigenetic output and create and shape the future health that you're going to have.
Wow. And
so that was the purpose of the book. Like I said, we were seeing, 300 to 400 patients a week doing all personalized care for well over 15 years in Ohio, and have been doing, developed programs for Lifetime Fitness where we, processed about 240,000 lives. So, I think I've seen a few people,
I absolutely love it. You're right in the vein of the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast here with your nutritional work. And maybe we can start there. It seems like this work that you're in, and as a nutritionist, that field just gets completely underplayed in the modern medical educational system. But it seems that you're going after a very personalized brand of wellness. Do you feel that the modern healthcare systems have really failed when it comes to personalization, which when you take a look at something like epigenetics and metabolism and all these things, they are very, very biologically unique? Please push back if you disagree, but is that a fair statement?
I think that where they haven't failed is something like pharmacogenetics, where you're looking at the omics of how a person processes a drug. That they've really latched onto and understand that. I think where they've just failed in general is understanding the value of lifestyle and then the influences of lifestyle, meaning, hey, you know what? There are quite a few studies on natural compounds that could influence your metabolism and maybe reduce your need to go to a drug right away.
Right.
Or the diet. Look, the reality is there's a lot of people that know they could eat better, but they still choose not to. What we failed to do in healthcare is explain the why to them. Mm-hmm. Why do you need to eat better so that you can feel better And then we've also failed to provide good choices for a certain part of the population either. So I think that's a problem. So, my background, I'm a clinical pharmacist. I taught for 18 years or 17 years at the College of Pharmacy and Medicine. I've taught at taught a master's in nutrition course. I'm the current educational co-chair of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, where we train about 10,000 doctors a year.
Wow.
So I think in conventional medicine, you do have that issue of people still thinking, evidence-based. Well, you know what? Once we get past the use of 2 drugs at any given time, we don't really have much of an evidence base in modern medicine. It's all based on single drug trials, at the most a tertiary trial where there's 3 drugs at a time. But really, wow, people were doing 8 drugs at a time. And then they're adding vitamin D. And then they're deciding to do bulletproof coffee. And then they're deciding to do interval training. And then they're deciding to restrict their eating. And it's one of those things where what we really need to do is grasp what are people doing. That was the whole purpose of us building our cloud-based informatics system, was to capture how do you feel, what are your biometrics, what's your wearable data say, what's your lab say, what drugs are you on, what nutrients are you taking, and now what is your outcome? Because then we can start to shape personalization and have meaning as we start to test things like epigenetics through looking at DNA methylation and finding out, hey, am I really doing what I need to do to age more gracefully? Because you know what? People do a lot of stuff. They may look pretty on the outside, but I still see their blood chemistry. And I go, wow, you just look pretty, but you're plaquing your arteries still. So anyway.
Wow, man. Listen, I feel like you fit right in here on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I want to make sure that we get to the points that we needed to get to here. But that fascinates me. I was just going to say that really fascinates me. The way you talk about the compounding of different substances prescribed by the doctors. And then again, we're all kind of playing our own doctor. And I think the reason that is because a lot of the traditional solutions don't make us feel better. As you said, Agreed. How do you feel? So we have to kind of play our own, I'm feeling better now that I'm on this, CBD oil or whatever it is, like you said, right. Fasting. But the reality is a lot of this stuff is new. We don't know what's going on. And with cloud computing and kind of AI learning and things like that, there could be some massive, massive breakthroughs here.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we developed I think a pretty elegant system of clusterizing personalization. Because look, in general, I just saw it over all the years of seeing so many people. People kind of fall into buckets. It's like, hey man, I'm really stressed out, and that stress is causing me to crave food. And now I'm craving sweets and carbs, and I'm eating too many of them. And also that stress is causing me not to sleep. So now my thyroid binding globulin's going up, and my thyroid's slowing down. Wow. Now I just gained 20 pounds. I feel fat. I feel sluggish. I feel like I'm pushing a thought through Jell-O. Or it could be, I was put on 3-4 rounds of antibiotics. Now I got gas and bloating, and my bowel's kind of irritable, and I'm anxious, and I don't really have control over my belly. Or right. It's people kind of fall, and it's the dance in this whole thing is understanding when cases are complicated, or like when people have more complicated events. And then there should be a lot of empowerment messaging to say, you know what, you got this. You should be able to take care of this for yourself if you got good information. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bro science and people out there that aren't necessarily in the trenches working on people every day. That, for myself, I've written 22 books. I've taught 4th year med students. I understand the clinical side, but, I also understand the lifestyle side, because that part's every bit as important, that we meet people where they can make decisions on their own and take care of those minor problems instead of waiting until the wheels come off the cart and they need anxiety drugs and antidepressants and statin medications and all this stuff that has kind of polypharmacy negative events associated with them when you start to put all that stuff together in one brew, right? Mm-hmm. So why should we be looking at what is your metabolic code? Where are your roadblocks to your metabolism so that we can target those and fix those? Because when we fix those, you feel better. And nothing motivates a person to change their lifestyle habits and behaviors better than feeling better, right? better is more better, right?
So true. As soon as you start building, it really builds momentum, just like it builds momentum the other way in poor health. When you actually start feeling better and you wake up and you feel like Superman because you got that good night's sleep and, your sleep system has been regulated, whatever it may be, you're 100% right there. Can we dig into, because we're all about longevity improvement and disease prevention and just basically taking responsibility for our own health here on the podcast. Can you dig into some of those metabolic blocks? I don't know if you want to go over the 9 key factors or just anything that you think would be pertinent on the show, whatever you think is appropriate.
Well, I mean, the first thing is, when you talk about longevity, I think you have to start looking at aging as a disease. That, when you look at the current literature being published, they talk about, and look, when I wrote the Metabolic Code, and my first conceptual writings on it was in 1999. And well, I've been doing this work since 1985. So it's kind of, I've been around the block on it.
I've seen it all.
I have seen it all. I mean, oh my God, everybody should just drink lots of fat and everybody's going to get better. To don't eat fat, to be vegan, don't be vegan, right?
South Beach diet, diet pills.
Right. Yeah. The ice cream and tuna fish diet. I mean, I've seen it all. But the point being is that no one thing's going to work for everyone. There are some generalizations that really are good, but in the end, metaflammation, metabolic inflammation, the term metaflammation is what's in the literature now, which means that you're doing things where your body is currently turned on its inflammatory processes, and your body's supposed to turn those on in order to heal. But it's supposed to turn them off once you're healed. Where we're at is that people are in these chronic states like diabetes. 50% of the adult population are diabetic or pre-diabetic. They've got heart disease. A third of all adults, 50% of adults over the age of 50. Obesity, 42% of the population. So you got all these different populations of people where inflammation is a chronic process in them that it doesn't stop. Now, why did they build that up? Well, turns out, pretty easy one. If you eat a bunch of sugar and take in too many calories, you gain weight. I think everybody will go, okay, I agree with that. I ate too much, I gained weight. Problem is when you gain weight, your visceral fat or the fat that you start to lay in around your organs becomes very metabolically active and it releases a bunch of inflammatory compounds. And that's why, for example, during this pandemic, a lot of people that succumbed to it, they had pre-existing conditions, and those conditions related to events where they had low-grade inflammation in their body already.
Right.
So low-grade inflammation basically tears away at the foundation of your chemistry. Jeez. All right, and it leads to making your insulin receptors not work as well. When your insulin receptors don't work as well, you produce more insulin, right? Because you got to make more insulin to get the same effect.
Sure.
That's called insulin resistance. So when you make more insulin, you make more adrenaline. When you make more adrenaline and noradrenaline, guess what happens? Your blood vessels get stiff. And when your blood vessels get stiff and your heart has to pump harder, your heart rate goes up. And when your heart rate goes up, you're lowering that amount of lifespan you've got for that heart. And insulin's the most inflammatory compound in your body. And in fact, when you are insulin resistant and your blood sugar spikes after a meal that you ate too much starch and too much sugar, that is the number one event that leads to the development of heart disease. Postprandial spikes in blood sugar.
Right.
So it could be by diet, right? That's one. If you're under a lot of chronic stress and your cortisol goes up, cortisol causes a family of inflammatory compounds to cascade through your body. They're called cytokines. And when those cytokines, in particular one, interleukin 6, when IL-6 gets coursing through your veins, it actually makes your insulin receptors get sluggish. And there's a reason for that. Because when you're under stress and your body thinks it's fight or flight, your body's response is, hey, we got to keep as much sugar in your bloodstream as possible. Because you might be fighting a white tiger. So these inflammatory cytokines, though, have another downward effect, meaning interleukin 6 causes you to trigger gut permeability changes, so that you then start to be more reactive to foods, and your immune system in your gut starts to get pushed harder to make more inflammatory compounds. Now, why is it so important that we're making these inflammatory compounds? Because the term metaflammation is associated with another term called aging, inflammatory aging. And so the process is, I can trigger it by inappropriate diet, and I start to create sugar spikes. I could have, shoot, man, I could be eating a bunch of glyphosate laden food, right? I could be eating laden food, and the pesticides are causing problems.
Sure.
That'll cause you to gain weight. There's a lot of data that kind of shows that obesity kind of began in the U.S. with the induction of, all the organophosphates that came into our food chain.
It's so crazy. It makes perfect sense, though.
Yeah, right. So you've got environmental burden. It could be the way I'm eating. It could be the stress I'm under. It could be a medication I'm taking.
Sure.
So there's a lot of medications that, it's one of the databases that's actually did 3 different databases on this and wrote 4 books on it, was drug-induced nutrient depletion. So people go on a drug, 6 months later, stuff starts going wrong. And it's not like they had an allergic reaction where they're itching or, the tongue turned black, right? Nothing like that happened. But because the drug depleted certain nutrients, all of a sudden, their metabolism is slowed down. Or they're starting to crave food, or they're starting to notice that they're depressed. And when you're depressed, you eat more. And so that's called drug-induced nutrient depletion.
Wow.
And then there's folks that train. There's folks that don't train at all. They don't exercise. Mm-hmm. And then there's people that over-exercise. Either one of them will get you in a bad place.
That's so true.
So,
has there ever been a worse time for I mean, I'm sure we all think this way, right? It is the curse of history, but I feel like over-exercise is maybe more common now than ever before.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? I mean, I work with athletes in all 5 major league sports, plus car racing, plus Olympians. And I mean, I'm the clinical director for the Pro Football Hall of Fame Performance Health Program. So I'm around a lot of athletes as one part of my life.
That's cool.
So yeah, it is cool. So people don't realize that you're not an athlete. So sometimes they go to a trainer and it's like, hey, we're going to do this really wild, high intensity training. And then we're going to do it twice today. And what you don't realize is what separates an athlete isn't the muscle on their body. It's their nervous system. It's their capacity to handle stress. And so when you train really hard and then you overtrain and you stress your nervous system, that's where you get into trouble with changes in heart rate variability, changes in neural firing and brain coherence.
Right.
And so I try to encourage people to understand, look, you're not a pro athlete. Don't train like one.
Yeah, you don't need to be. You don't need that high performance. And look at how these pro athletes end their careers. All the tennis players have tennis elbow, and their elbows don't work, and all the wrestlers need hip replacements. And I think it's hard to deny some people their happiness. I think some people like a taste of that performance, and maybe that makes them happy, in which case, God bless. But as far as like optimal health, optimal performance, optimal longevity, you don't want to beat yourself up like these athletes. Why would you? You want to do something less intense, which I would say is more suitable to a wellness lifestyle.
100%. I mean, I look, I'm one of those exercise meatheads. I mean, I've trained a lot over my life, but when I turned 50, I started to really dial it back. Right. And now that I'm turning 61 tomorrow, and I do moderate. I really consider my exercise moderate. I mean, yeah, I did maybe interval sprints for 15 minutes on the treadmill yesterday, but then followed up with maybe a little bit of an assault bike at a lower pace. And I'll do some weights 3 times a week for 30 minutes. But, I mean, in my 20s, I qualified for the U.S. Nationals in bodybuilding, and I was a collegiate I was a scholarship athlete. I mean, but you have to understand, training to be well is different than training for a living. And I understand why people train hard. People train hard to kind of blow off some of their stress and steam. I think that if we could give people coping tools better where they weren't relying on exercise to get rid of all of their excessive cortisol, maybe they would consider moderate exercise enjoyable. But most of the time it's like, I got to hit that punching bag at least 100 times, you know?
Yeah, is there some sort of cathartic release? That's a really good point. And stress seems to be a big cornerstone of what you do.
It is.
I'm a little concerned at how basically our entire modern society here in the West, especially in America, is kind of stress-based and stress-inducing. And I feel that it's one of the biggest threats to our overall health and wellness.
I I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think, when I look at, so, given the fact that we live in a modern world and there's 85,000 chemicals in the environment, and who knows what our food quality is, but in the end, people eat too much, they eat too often, they eat too late. They allow stress to dictate all components of their life for the most part. They're either feeling like my questionnaire, one of the questions is, do you feel overcommitted? I mean, I don't ever get somebody to answer no on that question.
Wow. Jeez.
Everybody feels overcommitted. There's people that feel anxious. They perseverate. They make lists. They get interrupted sleep. And a lot of people don't even identify that when you have trouble sleeping, this is in the book, getting a good night's sleep is in the book. People don't realize that insomnia is a disorder of hyperarousal, meaning that your brain took on so much stress during the day that its circadian rhythm of stopping the stress hormones and starting the melatonin can't take place.
Wow. Geez.
And so the big mistake people make is they say, I'm going to drink to put myself to sleep, which throws off their REM and deep sleep so they don't feel rested, or
100%.
they just try to take a sleeping pill. And what you have to understand with sleep is if you're having trouble sleeping, whether you're having trouble going to sleep or staying asleep, bottom line is you need to work on the stress load that you have during the day. Now, I'm not going to say, look, I'm writing 2 books. I run 2 companies. I lecture. I have a very busy day. I mean, most days are pretty busy, but I also take time to exercise. I wake up each morning and have quiet, reflective time for 30 minutes before I start my day. Mm-hmm. I teach people how to do deep breathing, even just box breathing, 3 minutes twice a day, just to unload their stress.
100%.
Because, and then you can use things like theanine or Relora or holy basil, which are great for people that are feeling anxious and overcommitted. And one of the best signs of that, I mean, just honestly, is you get home from work and you want to go hug a potato chip bag. It's like, oh, I gotta have these chips, it's like, man, I need some comfort food, and let me get a glass of wine because I just made it home. I just made it.
Yeah, it kind of ties into the addiction mindset of the trauma of the day, and then you're right. So you take this chemical comfort in either a bag of potato chips or a glass of wine. That's so true, man.
Yeah, man, that's that whole reward cascade. So,
Right.
Ken Blum did all that pioneering work in psychoneuroendocrinology, looking at the dopamine receptor. And it turns out that, the alcohol gene, the D2-allele1 gene SNP that makes you more prone for alcoholism also drives other hedonic urges, like cigarette smoking, like gambling, like sex addiction, like shopping, right? So that I spend a lot of time with people as we're unwinding their stress, getting them to understand that it's a physical manifestation. Your thyroid hormones go down, so you don't burn fat as well and your metabolism slows down. Your blood sugar goes up, so you store fat easier. You trigger your craving patterns. So I have so many people, and look, I've run weight loss programs on hundreds of thousands of people. So people get really low self-esteem because they can't stick with the plan, right? It's right. Like, I know you gave me this food list and I really wanted to follow it. And I really know I need to lose weight. And then the next thing that comes out of their mouth, I'm just bad. I just can't do it. It's not that. They don't understand that the physiology that they have is the physiology that's allowing them to crave when they get under stress.
Yes.
And they can't hold on. And so fix that. And now you can start to feel empowered again. And honestly, all of my work goes towards people deserve vitality at every stage in life, whether it's a 4-year-old, a 40-year-old, or an 80-year-old. People deserve to feel the best they can given the situation they're in.
I love
That's
it.
it.
I love it. That's super empowering, man. And I think there's a lot of disempowering messaging out there. So I love to hear that being preached. Just to kind of recap though, it sounds like you have a lot of great natural ways to fight that stress without turning to, like you said, a pill or even needing to, go and blow off some steam. I'm sure you're a fan. You said breathing. I'm sure you're a fan of things like meditation. And do you have any other kind of stress tips before we move on?
Well, I mean, I think that just the box breathing is the easy one for the person. That's the 3-minute win, right? 4 seconds in, hold 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold 4 seconds. Release the stress that you have in the morning. Think of it on the exhale. Mm-hmm. At the end of that 3 minutes, be grateful for something. That's a great way to do that a couple times a day. Obviously, I did Tai Chi for 20 years. I mean, I think Tai Chi is kind of cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Tai Chi is so cool.
Yeah. And then, just remember that when we talk about stress, we're talking about that triad of adrenal, thyroid, pancreas, how those 3 organs work together to create either good energy and vitality or gaining weight and feeling fatigued. Wow. It's a simple message, right? It's like, where's my cortisol? Where's my glucose? Where's my insulin? Where's my thyroid hormones? And how am I feeling? Am I tired midday? Am I crashing midday? Do I have energy to get through my day? Oh, I don't. Oh, wow. Am I craving salt? Yeah. Okay. That may be that your adrenals are a little weak. Where's my blood glucose at? So that's a key that covers kind of 3 big keys that I talk about in cracking the metabolic code.
Go and get it, everybody. You can find it on Amazon everywhere. Cracking the Metabolic Code, 9 Keys to Optimal Health. I just love it. It really tickles my fancy because I'm so fascinated between this link between the physiological self and the mental self and the spiritual self. And we tend to segregate those types of health. Right. But really the mental health, the emotional health, the spiritual health, and the physical wellness are all one. And it seems like that's what you're preaching, man. So I could not agree more.
Yep. I mean, I don't know how you separate it. I don't even know how you separate biomechanics from biochemistry because, a lot of strength coaches are like, I don't really worry about how people are eating. I'm training them. I'm looking how their foot strike is,
But like, it's all tied. You're exactly right.
You realize if they've got inflammation in their hip due to eating gluten, that maybe that foot strike's off, so it's that kind of stuff. So right. It's all tied together. You get you're one metabolic being and it's all driving how you think, feel, act, and where you're going to age.
It's incredible. Listen, I would love to do follow-up interviews with you. I feel like you vibe very well with this show. Again, we're focusing today on the book Cracking the Metabolic Code, but check out all of Jim's work. Before we wrap it up, this is the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. You are a, 40-year certified nutritionist? I have to ask you about coffee, man. I'm sure you have all sorts of thoughts on the studies on coffee and disease prevention, the over-caffeination of our society as a whole. I'm not setting you up. Give me your, pardon the pun, unfiltered take on coffee.
I'll give you my cold filtered take.
There you go. Perfect.
I love coffee. I think coffee has some scientific evidence that it has antioxidant benefits that may actually prevent cardiovascular disease. I'll tell you what I think is the biggest problem. You did mention something. There is over caffeination. So, when people are drinking, 4 double monsters a day, and then drinking, 6 Americanos a day, right, that's going to be a problem. So over caffeination is a problem. Is coffee a problem? Absolutely not. I think it's a natural product with a lot of great compounds in it. If you happen to be one of those people that have a genetic predisposition to not metabolize coffee, well, then you're going to have to either drink it earlier in the day if you enjoy it, or you may have to drink decaffeinated coffee that's obviously Swiss water processed. So you enjoy that taste of coffee without the caffeine, which you don't metabolize, and therefore hyper excites you and keeps you up at night. But coffee, man, I love it.
Oh, man, you got the Swiss water processing down and everything. I knew you would be up on it. But because we're always taking a look at all the data bodies that are coming out every week about coffee, and sometimes they're saying that coffee is bad, but most of the time they're saying that coffee is really, really good. So just had to get your take on that.
Bad rap. Totally got a bad rap. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where that bad rap came from because the majority of the evidence clearly lies on the side of coffee's good for you.
I love it, man. Absolutely fantastic. Now, here we are at a half hour. Is there anything else that you want to address before we kind of wrap this show? And I'll let you get on with your day here.
Well, I think the biggest thing for people to understand is no one is going to take care of your health better than you are. Do not rely on anyone else. You can use whatever team you need behind you, but you should be informed. You should understand your lab tests. I wrote a book called Your Blood Never Lies. So it goes through how to read a lab test for health instead of waiting for a disease. You should really become informed, because most people will spend more time learning about the next refrigerator they're going to buy than learning about their health. And you've got to take the time to reap the rewards. And believe me, as a 61-year-old, as of tomorrow, I feel fortunate that I can get on a treadmill and run at 12 miles an hour in intervals for 15 minutes and feel healthy and feel vital and get good night's sleeps. And it's because I just learned about how to make good choices through my life. And I think everybody can do that, and you can enjoy the benefits.
I love it. I love the empowerment. Everybody who is listening, go and check out Jim's work. Of course, today we are focusing on cracking the metabolic code, 9 keys to optimal health, available on Amazon and everywhere. Jim, one more time, buddy. This was a wonderful first-time interview. Really, you fit very well in with the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. So thank you, my friend, for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure. It was a blast.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Stay subscribed. We got all sorts of great stuff coming for you here on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. This is Jim Lavalle and Jordan Rivers signing off, saying have an extraordinary day. We'll see you next time on the CHS.